ones, and then maybe a couple extra ones. Let's see, this particular thing. Okay, and so we talked about game theory in chapter 5. We talked about costs and those 3 different approaches to firm behavior in chapters 6, 7, and 8. So that'll be grounds for the exam. We did a lot with game theory, so I expect that you'll be able to find a Nash equilibrium. I want you to know what dominant strategies are. That is, you have a pure strategy because your payoff is always going to be higher if you choose one option over the other. So find Nash equilibria, know what a dominant strategy is. Nash equilibria typically happen in odd numbers, which is just a weird quirk. So I would think about that. You should understand the implications of the tragedy of commons. So I'm going to give you a scenario. There are 2 fishermen that are fishing in a lake, and you should just you should recognize the fact that if they don't collude, if they don't work together, they're going to overfish. So if they worked together, they would probably not catch as many fish because that would be sustainable for the lake. So that's 3 points. Let's see. I also want you to be able to figure out what the total number of fish that they catch in the Nash equilibrium is. So find their best response functions and then add their total number of their best responses to each other together. Prisoner's Dilemma game is fun. The Nash equilibrium, though that is the most likely case, is actually the worst possible scenario for both players, which I think is hilarious. Let's see. You should understand returns to scale. So if I give you a production function, Q equals, let's say, K alpha, L alpha, or L beta rather, and I ask you a question about increasing or decreasing returns to scale, the question you should ask yourself is, does alpha plus beta, is that greater than, less than, or exactly equal to 1? So if, for example, you had a production function Q equals K squared L to the third, for whatever reason, you would say, well, 2 plus a third is greater than 1, so this is increasing returns to scale. You're getting more than double out if you put double in, for example. Let's see. Another thing about this particular function, the marginal product of labor is decreasing in this particular case, and that's because its share is less than 1, whereas the marginal product of capital is increasing because its exponent is greater than 1. So the difference between marginal products. That's exactly. You should be able to define the marginal product of labor and capital. And you should realize that under normal circumstances, marginal products are decreasing. You should understand what an isoquant is, and you should be able to demonstrate, at least be able to recognize the explanation of the isoquant, that it's some level of output based on varying the amounts of capital and labor that you're using. You should be able to define the marginal rate of technical substitution, and also know is the slope of the isoquant. Remember when we had fixed proportions in consumption goods with L-shaped Leontief preferences? There are also isoquants that follow that particular shape. If I give you a production function that looks like this, maybe, let's see, 7a plus 3b, and I also give you the price of A and the price of B, you should be able to tell me what the cost minimization combination is of these two inputs. So you should be able to do a cost min if I give you A, or the price of A and the price of B, if the production function looks like this. A hint, this particular production function has perfectly substitutable inputs, so that should tell you something about the shape of the isoquants. It should also tell you something about whether there might be a corner solution involved. Let's see. In general, for any total cost function, let's just make it quadratic. So let's say we have let's make it cubic. This part is the variable part. This part is the fixed part. It's variable because as you add Q, you increase total costs. So you should be able to isolate different parts of the cost function. And in fact, I did use a cubic a couple different times. Let's see. The average total cost is just going to be the total cost function divided by Q. So if I was given a particular cost function and asked to find the average total cost function, I might just divide through by Q to find this. If it's cubic, for example, this question I think is fun. I don't necessarily know if I'm or not. Let's say we again have a production function. Q is equal to, let's just say like K to the half, L to the half, make it easy on me. If I were to say, I want the short run version of this output, or this particular production function, you might think, well, capital has to be fixed at some amount. So the output in the short run is equal to some fixed amount of capital. That's K bar. But labor is still allowed to vary. Let's say also that the fixed amount of capital in the short run is equal to 25 units, for example. So now the short run production function is this 25 L or 5 L to the half. So this is representing the fact that we're fixing capital in the short run. So a short run production function. Of course, you should always remember that the marginal rate of technical substitution is equal to wage rate over the rental rate, which is also analogous to saying that the marginal product labor to the marginal product capital. That's analogous. So I would like that. I would be able to define a firm's expansion path. I would know that, let's see, we looked at this picture already. So, we have quantity, we have cost, we have an average cost, and we have a marginal cost. If the average cost is greater than the marginal cost, we have economies to scale. So we continue to produce in order to get to this cost minimizing amount of compute. So this is increasing returns to scale. This is decreasing returns to scale. And this is the CRTS case, constant returns. So we will continue to produce so long as the average cost exceeds the marginal cost, for example. I still expect you to know things from consumer theory like substitution effects. So if we're choosing between L and K in our inputs and the price of one of those things changes, I expect that you'll be able to tell me how our new optimal combination of capital and labor looks like. So if the price of capital decreases, for example, we would probably want to employ more capital, but we would probably employ more capital and labor overall if they're both normal. So think about income and substitution effects, but remember with production, the income effect is called a scale effect. So the total amount of inputs that we're using. So I expect you to be able to work through that. Yeah. This question's fun, but I don't know if I'm going to leave it in there. Because I think it's more of a test of algebra skills than it is of microeconomic theory, so I don't know. I'll sleep. You should know why in game theory we choose mixed strategies. Essentially, we're trying to avoid exploitation, the other player exploiting the fact that we would only choose one or the other thing. Let's see. In my personal opinion, extensive form games are easier to represent sequential games are easier to express in the extensive form, that is with a decision tree, whereas one-shot simultaneous games are easier to represent in the normal form, according to me. You should know the definition of a group trigger strategy. You should know the definition of value marginal product. Let's see. I'm going to try not to be too tricky, but if I give you a marginal cost function, let's just say 30 plus 6Q, and I give you a price of like 60. And I say find the profit maximizing condition, you should immediately realize that price is equal to the marginal revenue if this is a firm that is in a perfectly competitive market. So I might just go through this particular exercise. 6Q. Did I really just make up numbers? That gave an exact number. Yay, that makes me happy. So I would think about doing that. And I'm probably going to add some different ones. Since we had very few people in class today, it's probably not going to draw as heavy from the last section. So I'm gonna rewrite, add a couple more questions, maybe take some out. But in general, this should get you started. Due on Wednesday. It's probably gonna be like 42 questions again.